I hear tapping on the bedroom window. The dog was now running from left to right. I was trying to scream, absolutely going completely paralyzed with fear. This happened about 6 years ago when I was 16. I had all but forgotten about it until a few weeks ago when my mom brought it up. I grew up in a rural town in Australia. My house was 30 minutes out of town with 20 acres of thick bushland behind it and a driveway that was about a 5-minute drive on its own. The neighbor's house shared the driveway but was surrounded by another 5 acres. So incredibly isolated. It always felt like a really safe place because it was so far from other humans. But of course, that comes with its own downsides. No one can hear you scream. But no one can hear you scream. In 2012, my brother graduated high school and my folks got sick of being so far out, so decided to rent the house out and move closer to town. But by then, my mom was so used to not having neighbors that it annoyed the out of her. We once heard a neighbor sneezing, and that was the last straw. So a year later, end of lease, we moved back, but this time without my brother, who was settled at uni. When we went back, we moved into our original rooms and put all the furniture back how it was, more or less. My room was the only one on the left side of the house. I chose it for the view of the shed, which used to have chickens and ducks and alpacas. Instead of swapping rooms and having to do all my posters and stuff again, I just started sleeping with the light on. The only other thing that was different was that the renters had left a horse float and a caravan in the paddock next to the shed. I couldn't have cared less, but my mom was calling the renters every other week to get them to move it, ASAP. Also, at this time, my dad was working with a mining company and installing a pipeline to an island off the East Coast. So he was away for 4 weeks at a time, then home for 2 weeks, etc. So onward to the point. One night when my dad was away at work and it was just me and mom at home, I was exhausted and went to bed really early. Ended up having the absolute worst dream of my life. I was a little at the time, being a 16-year-old girl, but I barely spoke for the next few days. It had truly shaken me to my core. It started with my dog barking, as she would for the entire 5 minutes anyone was coming down the driveway. I went out to get her, but it was pitch black. I could only just see her standing at the edge of the grass by the drive. And she was standing really aggressively, in a way I only ever saw her do to kangaroos and the neighbor's dog. I started hearing footsteps crunching on the pebbles, then male voices coming from either side of the house. The dog was now running from left to right, absolutely going ape and getting gradually closer to me like they were closing in, and she was trying her hardest to protect me. I was trying to scream, but the only sound I could make was that of a labored breath, and I was completely paralyzed with fear. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they were laughing at each other and whispering. This kept going for what felt like an eternity, the mysterious male voices getting closer and closer, but never coming out of the shadows enough for me to know who they were. Eventually, I woke up. It wasn't like a movie where I jumped up and was out of breath. No. I was laying in bed like a dead pharaoh, and my eyes opened like I'd never been asleep, only blinked. After a few days of acting weird, Mom finally asked what was up. She's not a talkative person, so she asked it like offhandedly and wasn't looking at me. As I told her, she stopped what she was doing and looked at me like I had just spoken in tongues. Turned out, the night I had the dream, shortly after I went to bed and just before sunset, 2 guys rocked up to the house saying they were there to collect the horse float. The dog went bananas at them, which was only strange because normally, as soon as you were close to her, she'd fall on the ground and demand belly scratches. Mom didn't recognize these guys as anyone in the family that rented from us, but they knew about the and Mom wanted it gone, so she put the dog in her lockup and took them to it. One of them took it upon himself to take a walk around the back of the house, parallel to the shed and behind the dog lockup, then came back and pointed out there was only one car in the driveway, that he had noticed before there was a van. Whose van was it? Even said something like, quote, "Husband not home tonight?" unquote, while looking at my window with light coming through the curtains. To say the least, Mom was freaked out. How did he know how many cars we have when she's never met either of them before? In an instant, she thought they must have come round before, seen 2 cars, and gone away. Following the man's gaze to my room, she let out a relaxed laugh and said, "Dad was in there cleaning his guns, but he's probably done now and she'll go get him so he can help with the float." The most intense weapon my dad has ever owned is a rusty machete, so I have no idea where that came from on Mom's end, but I'm eternally glad for it. They, of course, protested and said they could manage it, but she bolted inside, locked all the doors, then stood by the front window with a knife, watching them drive away, without the horse float. When Dad got home a week or so later, he called the renters up in a fit of rage and found out they hadn't sent anyone to get it for them. But all their friends knew it was there because they'd been trying to organize help to get both in one day. Purely because I was sleeping with a light on at the time it happened, and because I went to bed early that night, my mom and I escaped a potentially seriously horrific situation. I, 22 female, live in a brand new apartment complex on a nice side of town. My city is pretty safe in general. This is the first time I've lived alone, so even though it's a safe area, I took some precautions, which included installing a Ring video doorbell. I have honestly never needed it in the 6 months I've lived here, as no unexpected visitor has ever come by. Until last night. I was sitting at home alone with my dog, working on some homework. It was nearly 8 p.m. and starting to get dark. At night, I have my Ring set up to alert me when any person is detected outside my door. I received a notification of motion at my door, but I didn't think much of it. At 8 p.m., people are still walking down the hall, up the stairs, etc. About 30 seconds later, I receive several loud knocks on my door, and my Ring is pushed rapidly 3 times. At this point, I'm spooked, and my dog is going nuts. I open up the app to see 2 men standing outside my door. I debated internally on if I should open it or not, but then decided since it wasn't quite dark yet and my neighbors were home, that it would be safe to do so. I slowly open the door, just enough to put my head out. The man nearest to me says they're with the, quote, wreath committee, unquote, and complimented my wreath. He then went on to say that he was with an internet company and he and his partner were there to offer me a deal. Now, my apartment has a very strict no-tolerance policy for solicitation of any kind. We are told to immediately report that kind of activity, and there are signs posted all around stating that solicitation is prohibited by law here. I told the men I am happy with my current service and was not interested in switching. The man who spoke first continued to speak about the great deal they were offering. I continued to decline. He kept saying that he lived really close to here and he'd be happy to personally set up the service. He even offered to come inside and help me get started immediately. I declined his offer once more, and he reiterated that if I changed my mind, give him a call because he could be there in 5 minutes to help me out. He handed me a business card and I tried to end the conversation again. He then tells me that he just, quote, can't walk away knowing I could get such a good deal and I'm saying no to it, unquote. At that point, my instincts were telling me something was off. I decided to take a more aggressive approach, and I asked him if he was aware that my apartment has a strict no solicitation policy. He said he was unaware, but that he had cleared it with management. My apartment has a very small management team, and I know every single one of them. I asked who he cleared it with, and he said he cleared it with the, quote, guys on the golf cart, Mike and Will, unquote, and that Mike was a great guy. Now I knew it was all a lie. Our management team here is only women. There is nobody by the name of Mike or Will. Only one man works here, and his name is Joe. I say thanks, but I'm not interested, and close the door, locking it loudly. I took a closer look at the business card he handed me. It had a logo and the name he gave me, but the email was not company email. It was a Yahoo account. The phone number also did not appear when I searched it up for the company. I decided to post about my encounter in the residents-only Facebook page. A few other women commented that they had had similar interactions that night, but that they were given different names. The strange thing was, none of the men or couples were approached. It was only women they spoke with. They talked to my upstairs neighbor and my neighbor across the hall, both girls, and didn't speak to either of the men that live on the same floor as me. Everyone was given different names, and everyone was offered vastly different, quote, deals, unquote, and 2 women were told that they didn't have business cards to hand out. I thought it might be worth Googling the guy's name to see if anything popped up. Sure enough, the second result was a report on an offender registry. Turns out, the man who spoke at my door has 5 felonies and has served several years in jail for various charges, including trafficking a controlled substance, theft by deception, and possession of stolen property. And I knew it was him because there was a photo attached to the report. He's currently on parole until November. I'm not sure if I'm overthinking this situation because this is my first time experiencing something like this. But I know it didn't feel right. Maybe I'm just being dramatic or paranoid, but the entire thing feels more than a little off. I'm not sure if they were just scammers or if they were just staking out places to rob, or worse. I reported it to the property manager who's investigating it today, but I'm just a bit uneasy about the whole thing. If they return, I'll be calling the police for sure. As of the time of me writing this, nothing else suspicious has happened, and I'm safe at the moment. I'll continue to stay vigilant. I'm a woman in my 30s who lives alone in a small house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in the UK. The street is a maze of roads away from the main road, which means that other than delivery guys and the occasional salesperson, you very rarely see anyone that you don't recognize. I don't exactly know all my neighbors, but I know what they look like and I know where they live. I can recognize their cars, etc. This weirdness happened over the space of a few months several years back. I work from home, so I'm usually in, and sometimes I don't have a lot to do. The first day was one of those lazy days. It was about 4 p.m., and I'm sitting on the sofa watching some daft shit about alien cover-ups. Someone knocked on the door. I have a surveillance camera hidden in the wooden canopy above the front door, so I checked to see who it was because I wasn't expecting any deliveries and I couldn't be bothered to deal with a salesperson. It was a woman who looked late 40s to early 50s, very smartly dressed, like really expensive clothes and jewelry, stuff I could never afford. Most people around here generally couldn't afford it either. We're not an affluent area, and this lady stuck out like a sore thumb. She looked flustered and agitated, glancing towards the back garden before trying to look through the tiny frosted glass window on the front door. I noticed she was carrying a dog's lead, but I didn't see a dog. As it happens, at the far side of my back garden, there are 2 hedges. There's the hedge that I own within my property boundaries, and there's a second hedge outside my boundary owned by the city council, and that's along a small grassland where people walk their dogs. And I know for a fact there's a hole in the council's hedge, which I reported it to the council at least a dozen times over the past decade, and they've done the square root of sod all about it. Because of my hedge, I can't reach it to do anything about it myself. Consequently, when I saw the dog's lead, I thought, I bet her dog has gone through the hole. If it's a big dog, it's not getting into my garden, but if it's a small dog, it might be able to work its way through, and I've always got some cooked meat, so I figured I might be able to lure it out. I am a dog lover, so of course I want to help this woman if I can. Because when I was a kid, my own dog went missing for a few weeks, and I thought I was never going to get him back. I was heartbroken for those weeks, but fortunately we did get him back, and ever since, I've been extremely sensitive to pets in need. I open the door, and this woman gives me the weirdest look, like she was expecting someone completely different to answer the door and that I shouldn't be there. To be fair to her, my mom used to live here too, so I didn't think much of that weird look to begin with. Maybe she was expecting my mom? I say hello, and she just stares at me for the longest 30 seconds before she tries to look past me and asks to see Margaret. I don't know what it is about other people's mistakes, but whenever someone has the wrong number, I always end up apologizing as if it's my fault. So that's what I did. Apologized and told her there's no Margaret at this address. Again, she gives me that look, only this time there's anger behind it. Quote, "Yes, there is," unquote, she insists. It occurs to me at this point that I have a relative called Margaret, but she lives about 60 miles away and I haven't seen her in years. Nonetheless, just in case she's got her addresses muddled, I ask, "Are you looking for Margaret?" But she just hisses at me, quote, "You know exactly who I'm looking for. What have you done with her?" Unquote. I am absolutely lost at this point. I've lived here 20 years and I know the name of the previous owner, so I know she's not asking for them. I also know the names of the neighbors and the names of the people who have lived on the street in the time I've been here and since moved. None of them are called Margaret. No one is Margaret. So all I can do is tell her she's got the wrong address, and she replies, "No, this is," reading out my address, and tells me I'm lying. That was a tad alarming. She is at the right address. She's not knocked on the wrong door. However, she clearly thinks I've done something to somebody who, to the best of my knowledge, has never lived here. I don't know how long the previous owner had this house, but we must be talking about at least 30 years since anyone called Margaret might have lived here. It's at this point that I notice that she subtly wrapped that dog leash around her now clenched fist, like she's planning to use it as a weapon. In my youth, I did plenty of self-defense training, so I'm not exactly scared of her as such, but I'm obviously getting a bit concerned about the situation that's brewing. I don't particularly wish to get involved in a brawl on my doorstep with a complete stranger. I'm torn between shutting the door in her face or trying to de-escalate the situation. In the end, I close the door a little so she's got less to aim at and tell her, "Look, I don't know who you're looking for, but if you think something's happened to your friend, maybe we should just call the police and let them sort it out." Sure enough, the woman slams her fist with the lead wrapped around it right into my door. I later discovered she'd struck that door hard enough to crack the frosted glass window in the middle of it. She's bleeding from doing it. It must have hurt, but she doesn't flinch or show any sign of pain. What the hell? Any confidence I had in my self-defense classes started to waver here because I'm not used to people who don't feel pain. All I can think now is that she's on something and having a really bad trip. So at this point, I put on my scariest voice and tell her, "Get the fuck back." I let her know I'm calling the police, and if she's still here when they get here, she can deal with them because I'm not dealing with her anymore. She tries to stop me from closing the door, but I shove her back and manage to get it closed and locked. And I make it a point to stand next to the door while calling 999 so she can hear me. While I'm waiting for the police to turn up, I watch her on the surveillance feed. She moves out of shot multiple times, presumably to check the back of the house, and I hear her calling out, "Margaret, Margaret." A few minutes before the police finally turn up, I see her kick over my wheelie bins in a rage. But then the most chilling thing happens. She walks back to the front door and literally stares directly into my camera. That camera is pretty well hidden. I'm not saying that nobody could spot it, but most people would only know it was there if they'd been looking for it. Most people aren't looking for cameras, right? She knew it was there. She must have eyeballed it previously. When? I don't know. I later reviewed all of the footage I had from that day, and she never made eye contact with it once. She never even looked in that direction. I only had about a week's worth of footage before the oldest footage is overwritten, and I checked everything I had, and she was only on camera that day. All I can think is that she'd been here more than a week prior. While she's staring right into it, she flips me the finger and makes a throat-cutting gesture before walking off. I head to the window to watch her leave, and she's walking like she doesn't have a care in the world. She doesn't look back, just wanders away. Police finally show up. Good job I wasn't being murdered. Take a statement, and I give them a copy of the surveillance footage, and that's that. I called a couple of times to follow up, but nothing. Nobody ever called me about it. I won't lie, this shit me up for weeks. I moved the knife block closer to the door, though out of sight of any of the windows. I started staying up really late and not getting much sleep, which really didn't help. On some nights, I was so tired that I started experiencing auditory hallucinations. I'd hear people who weren't there talking. And because this woman was the cause of all my stress, I heard her voice and the name Margaret, most of all. Every time I heard the gate open, it put me on edge. I'd review the surveillance footage every day. Eventually, as the weeks passed and I hadn't heard anything else, I started to regain some of my comfort and just put it down to a weird experience. It didn't last. About 4, maybe 5 weeks after the first encounter, she came back. It was just after midnight. I was in the living room mucking about on my phone with the TV on low volume for some background noise. I heard a car door slam and peeked out the front window. A dark-colored car was parked at the end of my driveway. I couldn't see what make or model it was, but it looked like some kind of estate car. I think Americans call them station wagons, right? I didn't see anyone moving about, but a minute later the front gate swung open with its metallic groaning, and there was a knock on the door. Even when I'm not involved in a blood feud over imaginary Margarets, I'm not answering the door at that time. I check the surveillance camera. Its night mode vision is pretty shitty, but I'm positive it's that woman again. I can even see what I think is the dog lead. And of course, she knows I'm watching her because she looks at the camera again, and I tell you, when someone is already giving you the heebie-jeebies, the way the night vision makes people's eyes look like soulless black voids doesn't do much to make you feel better. Suddenly she yells out, quote, "Shut that f***ing racket off and come out here, now," unquote. I had the TV on, but as I mentioned, it was on a very low volume. There's no way she could hear it from outside the front door. I couldn't even hear it if I walked into my own hallway. I'm convinced at this point she's mentally unwell, so I call the police again. I want them to stay on the line, but they just tell me that someone will be over soon and to call them back immediately if things escalate. So I'm waiting, watching, and just hoping she doesn't start trying to smash a window or something. She kicks over my wheelie bins again, I don't know what she's got against them, and yells out something else, which I couldn't quite make out, but whatever it was enough for one of the neighbors to come and investigate themselves. I watched the neighbor talking with her for about a minute. She's going on about something and wagging her finger towards my front door, but my neighbor is eventually able to get her to leave. He even sticks around a bit to make sure she's gone. Sadly, that also means she'd gone before the police turned up again and made me feel like I was a bother. Another statement, handing over more security footage, more nothing. I caught up with the neighbor the next day, and he apologized because it didn't occur to him to make a note of the registration plate. But he told me that she had said much the same thing as she had said to me previously, that she wanted to know where Margaret was and what I had done with her. I'm grasping for answers at this point. Even if she's mentally unwell, the fact that she's sticking to this Margaret story and has the right address makes me think there's something more to this than somebody having a breakdown. Then it clicks. Is Margaret her dog? Did she have a dog go through the hole in the back hedges? Is that what this is about? Does she think I've hurt her dog? It'd be another few weeks before she came back. This time at 3 a.m. I'm awoken by knocking on the door. A few minutes later, I hear tapping on the bedroom window. I know it's her. I can hear her saying things, but I can't really make them out because they're too muffled through the windows. It's like she didn't want to get the neighbor out again, so she's trying to keep it quiet. I jump out of bed and put on some clothes as quickly as I can. I try and follow her as best I can as she moves around the outside of the house from room to room, knocking, tapping, muttering. I think I hear a few coherent words like noise, racket, and I'm pretty sure she called me a bitch, but could be imagining that. I can't check the surveillance footage this time because she spray painted the damn lens. Not that it mattered much this time. She's not lingering by the front door. I think about calling the police again, but it's proven a waste of time so far, and I get the feeling if I call them out a third time and she's gone, then they're just gonna start accusing me of wasting their time even if I do have evidence. They've not exactly been helpful so far. In the end, I wait by the front door and listen. Eventually, she knocks again, and I call out, "Is Margaret your dog?" Dead silence. Nothing. I can't see anything through the frosted glass because it's too dark. I have no idea where she is, and I don't want to turn on the outside lights. I don't even know why. She knows I'm in the house because I've called out to her, but I still don't want to draw any more attention to myself. I end up standing out there for who knows how long, at least an hour, probably more, because the sun starts coming up. My heart is going a mile a minute, pretty much the whole time. Once it's bright enough, I start checking through the windows to see if I can see her. Nope, nothing. I tentatively open the front door and I look outside. Still can't see her. I grab something to arm myself with just in case, can't remember what, but check all around the house and the back garden. She's not there. As I'm heading back to the front door, I spot the oddest thing. The gate's closed. That gate is physically attached to the side of my house, and when it opens and closes, it makes a ridiculous amount of noise. You'd definitely hear it if someone opened or closed it when you were standing next to the front door, but it's closed. So what does that mean? Did she jump it somehow? Anyway, I open the gate and head out to the end of the driveway. I look around and there's no sign of anyone. I turned around to go back to the house and see she spray painted L-I-A-R, liar, on the front of my house and left the dog lead beneath it. That was, thankfully, the last time I ever heard from or saw this woman, but I think she still comes by sometimes. Ever since all this happened, I get these creeped out feelings occasionally at night and check out the window. I don't know whether I'm imagining it or what, but now and again, I swear I see a dark colored estate car out on the street. Not parked at the end of my driveway these days, but I just can't shake the feeling she's in there, watching my house. Perhaps she was looking for her dog and she keeps thinking she'll see me with it? I don't know. Thank you all for joining me for this story time. I really do appreciate it. To my returning friends, hi, welcome back. And to the newcomers, welcome. Thank you for stopping by. And please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you'll get the creep alert for the next story time. As far as why I chose these submissions, the Margaret story was the original one that I chose because it was the mystery of it all. Where is the dog? Was it a dog? If she's still visiting OP to this day. But the one that stuck with me the most in terms of just disturbing my spirit was the middle one, the second story. The woman with the Ring camera who opened the door to two men she didn't know. Because I didn't understand the choices that were made. Like, you're in the comfort and safety of your own home with a Ring doorbell. Why are you opening your door? But something happened. I was rereading OP's submission, scrolling through the comments, and I saw where she had addressed what made her get up and go to the door. And she literally said her guard was already down because she'd moved into a new area where there was no crime. And so there was an expectation of safety. But also, she said a panic came over her. And I was like, well, what kind of panic makes you go towards the thing that's dangerous instead of away from it? Because when I panic, I'm hiding under the bed, I'm jumping out the window, I'm doing anything other than walking to my front door and letting in the threat. Where they do that at, right? Who does that? But still, she said a panic came over her, which to me meant she was experiencing some kind of fear. And from what I know of the fear response, it's fight, flight, freeze. Those are the only three that I knew. But then I just go online to refamiliarize myself with what those are and if they cover how OP acted in the situation. And it turns out there's a fourth one, which I'm sure all of you knew. I am so embarrassed that I didn't know it as someone who's a big crime buff, but it's called fawning. So at base, the fawning response is there is safety in compliance. If I do what you say, go along with what you want, then you won't hurt me. And after looking this up, it seems pretty clear to me that this is what was going on with OP in that second story, and I never would have thought to even look it up if in that comment section she hadn't added that she panicked. Now it makes absolute sense why she acted and reacted the way that she did. Thanks again for listening, and that is it for this story time. Subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, please help us out in the algorithm by leaving a like if you like this, a dislike if you didn't, and a comment if you can, even if it's just hi.